So, Vanessa, I'll give a little bit of an intro. You are a certified life coach, a mental health advocate, and you are founder and executive director of the Zelma Foundation, for women's mental wellness. And we're going to learn more about your background, in the hour we have together. But I wanted to kick things off with learning a bit about your personal journey. So can you start by sharing your personal struggle with depression and how it's impacted you and your family?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy, for that introduction. And yes, I've been living with depression now for about 20 years. And initially, it came about at the height of my corporate career. By trade, I am a certified real estate appraiser. That has been my corporate career for 30 years. And the real estate market took off. So at the beginning of my career, I loved my job. I loved what I did. I could work a flexible schedule, so it worked well with family. So I loved it until the real estate market took off in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And work got so busy to a point where in order to keep up with the demands of the job, I was working 12 to 14-hour days. And so I was sleeping about 4 hours a night in order to keep up. And when I say in order to keep up, I should also preface that by saying I'm competitive. My nature is competitive. So I always wanted to be in the top three in my department. And so I would just work and work until my work was done. But that required me to sacrifice my sleep. And this was not a good idea. That is how the depression initially came about, unbeknownst to me, though. I wasn't aware. And so I did realize that I was no longer enjoying my job. And so in discussions with my husband, because he was at the point as well, he was like, I hate your job. Literally, I hate it because I worked from home and he and my daughter, they never really would see me. I would be in my office all the time. And so finally I said, okay, well, I want to switch careers. And so I went back to school to get my master's in business. And that is when something clicked. My last year of grad school, I was going to school at night, in the evening rather, and I pulled into the parking lot or the parking structure, and I didn't want to get out of my car. And I was like, what is wrong with me? This is not how I started my grad school track. Because I love school, I love learning. And in my courses, we always had to do presentations. I love presentations, but I had gotten to a point at that point where I didn't want to do presentations, and it just got really challenging. And so I started asking myself, what is wrong? And so I finished grad school and was able to leave the lender, the bank that I was working for that was requiring all these crazy hours. And I moved to a different lending institution. And because I wanted to get into management. And so at that, when I got into management, I was again loving what I did, but this depression, this thing that was causing me not to want to go into the office, that was causing me not to be able to focus when I am at work. And I was there for just under a year. And I told the national director, I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this to you. I need to resign. And she said, well, no, Vanessa, what do I need to do? How can I help you? And I love that. She was great, huge supporter. But I told her, this is not fair to you and the team. I need to be at my best, and I'm not. And I'll go into that a little later, but it was not only my depression, it was also my husband and I had legal custody of my niece and nephew after my sister had passed away. So there were a lot of things going on. And so I told her, I said, I need to just step away and take time out for myself and my family to get my mental health together. And on my journey, I share my story because I don't want people to do what I did. So I started having the symptoms of depression, the isolationism, and the lack of motivation in like 2004. But I didn't call it depression because I didn't realize, even though my undergrad degree is in psychology, I didn't call it that. I just thought that, oh, I'm just not really into work anymore, or something to that effect. But then
Mm.
I left the last lender, and I launched my own appraisal business. And fortunately, I was able to have a client that I could just tell them when I wanted work. So that worked because I knew that I couldn't work a full-time job. And I tried to manage and regulate my depression myself. And I would tell anyone, please don't do that. It took me 7 to 8 years to finally see a mental health professional. And that wasn't by choice. So I am going to back up a bit. So I did because after I quit my corporate job, there would be days, and this is where I really realized, okay, this is full on depression, where I would just sit on my couch. My daughter was at school, my husband was at work, and I would just sit. And I was like, this is not you. What is wrong? And so my husband said, you have to get some help. And so I did go see a psychiatrist, and he put me on Abilify first visit. And I started taking Abilify, but then I read the side effects. And so it can cause constipation. And so I wanted to reach back out to him so that I could get something else and so I could follow up because I already had digestive issues. And so I said, this is probably going to make it worse. So I called to reschedule an appointment, but he wouldn't return my phone calls. And then I just couldn't find him after that. And so, of course, that led
Mm.
me to not, so that kind of just made me stall, I'm going to say. Because I thought, oh, well, I can't reach the psychiatrist, so I'm just going to keep trying to manage this on my own. And
Mm.
so what I started doing was I researched, oh, like what can I do to, in a holistic manner to manage this depression. And so I started taking SAM-E and St. John's wort. And I did notice that when I took them, I was feeling a certain kind of way, but I didn't actually correlate it to the supplements. And so
Mm.
one day I woke up and I was doing my normal routine of getting ready to take my shower, listening to my contemporary Christian music as I always do. And all of a sudden I like blacked out and I went into this psychotic rage. And so my husband had to restrain me. My daughter, who was in high school at the time, had to call 911. And when the paramedics, the fire department, the police department came, I remember bits and pieces. And I remember the police officer standing in front of me and saying, tell me your birthday. And so at that point I knew, I said, okay, they want to make sure that I'm aware of who I am, where I am. But I blacked out after that. And so they took me to the emergency. And I don't remember this part, but my husband told me that when I was in the emergency, they asked me, do you want to go to a mental hospital? And he said, I told him yes. And
Mm.
as traumatic as that experience was, because I share my story because I don't want other people to go through what I went through. That was traumatic for my family to go through. And so that I had to go through that because that was the only way that was going to get me in front of a psychiatrist. And so when I was released from the hospital, I was recommended or referred to this psychiatrist, my psychiatrist that I have to this very day. And that was probably the best day of my journey at that point was going to see my psychiatrist that I have today. Because she told me, she said, Vanessa, I don't normally put my patients on an antidepressant, but she said, because of how deep and dark and where you are with your depression, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And she actually she practiced from my holistic perspective. And so
Mhm.
she sees what works for you. And then she was able to wean me off the medication. I was on the medication for about 6 years, I want to say. And she weaned me off. But my lesson for everyone with that is if you're taking supplements, please make sure that either your primary care doctor or a mental health professional knows what you are doing. Because after I got out of the hospital, I wanted to see what happened to me. Why did that happen? And so I started searching online to see, manic psychosis, St. John's wort, SAMI. And so apparently, when you're taking St. John's wort, it can stay in your system for up to 48 hours. And there was a psychiatrist that was working at the Air Force Base in California who had patients that basically went through the same thing that I did. And they were taking St. John's wort along with ginseng. And he had a patient who had a psychotic break, who had never had, like me, never had any former psychosis or history of psychosis. And so when you're taking these supplements, I highly, highly encourage and recommend that you make sure that they are being monitored by a medical professional so that you don't have to experience what I went through, and not just me, but what my family went through as well. And
Mhm.
another point that I just want to add on to this was um, when I started going through depression, like I mentioned, my sister had passed away. She passed away in 2002, and she was living with AIDS at the time. And she had basically given up. She stopped taking her medicine. And when I would go visit her at the hospital, and her husband, who that's how she actually became HIV positive, it was transmitted through her by her husband. He said, well, she won't take her medicine. And so I asked her, I go, why aren't you taking your medicine? And she goes, well, the kids have you, they have mama. And I said, well, no, it doesn't matter what I can do for them. They want you. Every kid wants the parent, especially if the parent is providing them with this loving environment. And so I really couldn't understand it until I was going through depression a few years later after she had passed away. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that that is what she was going through, because I knew my sister loved her kids. And so I said, I don't understand why you won't just take your medicine. But when you're going through depression, some of the messaging that you get is that, hey, the world will be better off without you. Your
Mhm.
life isn't worth anything. And so that is what was going on. And I realized that because I remembered one night when she was in the hospital and she called me at like 12:30 midnight. Of course, I'm up working. And she said, Nessa, I don't want to die. And I said, oh, I'm very happy to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. And so I asked her, I said, and I can't remember if she asked me or if I asked her if I could pray for her or pray with her. And so I prayed with her, and which is unusual for my sister because she normally, if I asked her that, if anybody else asked her that, she would say no. And so,
Mhm.
but she said yes. And so we prayed, but it was kind of too late. And when I say it was too late, the virus had already taken over most of her body. And so a few months after that, she passed away. And so I just share all that to say that you don't have to do it alone. please don't do it alone. And I'm thankful for spaces like ShareWell. And Amy has heard me say this. The members in my sessions have heard me say this. When I started attending these peer support group sessions, and when I started hosting the peer support group sessions, and they're for me, it's weekly, or sometimes if I attend another one, it's a couple of times a week. It's a game changer for when you're going through depression, when you're living with depression, because as humans, we're social creatures. And so just having somebody else to talk to, somebody to listen, somebody to hear you, we're all valid, we're all valuable, and
Mm.
you don't have to go through this journey alone. And the peer support groups help us go through this together because we are all in this together. And that's what I always share in my sessions.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And thank you for being so vulnerable about your story. Many of us, it takes a while for us to get comfortable sharing about our struggles,
Yeah.
but it is so connective. It inspires people on the receiving end to know, hey, it's okay for me to share my truth in this way. It's okay for me to ask for help. It's okay for me to admit that this challenge is going on for me right now. So thank you for modeling that for us. I'm curious, Vanessa. Let's talk techniques because you are a life coach. And I'm curious, what techniques would you offer to the people that you coach, or what has also personally worked for you as you navigate your journey with depression?
Yes. Thank you for that. So a few of the wellness techniques that I use. I'm a avid meditator. Meditation has also been a game changer for me in my journey. I'm working out, and this is pretty much how my day goes. So I wake up in the morning and I do all the family things I need to do, and then I work out. So I used to meditate as soon as I would wake up, but then I found that my mind was too foggy right after, wake awakening. So I work out, and then after I work out for about 15 to 25 minutes, then I go into my meditation because I've created this space that I worked out in. And so then I'll meditate for anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. So working out, meditation, peer support groups, game changer. And if you're not comfortable with a peer support group, I tell my clients you have to have some type of social support network, a circle, people whom you can talk to, people who understand, and I mean a positive support network, people who understand and just listen to you or can just be with you. Because
Mm.
that's something else that I tell folks is if maybe you know someone who has been withdrawing, because that's what happened with me. Depression makes you withdraw from everyone. Um, if you know somebody they're not themselves anymore, and especially post-pandemic, I notice a lot of people, if I'm not mistaken, the statistics state that depression rates increased during the pandemic. And so if you know someone who they're not themselves anymore, I encourage people to go and sit with that person because you just having another human present can make a huge difference. And you don't even have to say much, but just knowing that this person came to sit with me, that makes all the difference in the world. And see, for me, I did have my husband and my daughter. I was alone during the daytime, but of course, when they would come home, they were there. So that helps. But for someone who might live alone, what is my advice to them? Again, virtual online support groups
Mm.
can really help you to know that you are not alone because that is something that depression tells you you're alone. You don't matter, but you do. You do matter. Our lives are very valuable. And one of the things that I always share, if we don't run out of time during my sessions, is that we were all put here for a reason, a purpose. We all have something to give to this world, to people, to someone in this world. And I'm a firm believer that if you're going through depression, that means that you haven't gotten to that point yet. And the depression is probably trying to keep you from actually reaching that point of your purpose, that point of why you're here. So find that light. We all have a light within us. Or if you want to see it from a warrior perspective, find that warrior. Talk to that warrior that's inside of you. You can't fight a battle. A warrior wouldn't fight a battle laying down, right? So see your depression as that battle that you're the warrior against. And know that, yes, my life is valuable. I'm supposed to be here because I got those messages about how my life was invaluable and how my family would be better off without me. I got those messages. But I would literally sometimes just take shots at the air when I would be about like, nope, I'm gonna fight my way through this. And so you just find ways. And when I say working out, I want to go back to that. Working out. Whatever works for you. If exercising isn't the thing, maybe dancing. There have been days when I would just put on I would go to Pandora or Spotify and find a disco or a dance party playlist and
Mm.
just dance. And dancing, I'm sure, has a way to make all of us feel good. Um, so yeah, those are a few of my wellness techniques that I share.
Yeah, thank you. So much wisdom. I like the putting on the persona of that warrior. And Vanessa, you have what they would call an exemplary hero's journey, right? You've went
Mhm.
through I believe you said took you 8 years
Mhm.
to get some mental
Yep.
health support with a psychiatrist. You were trying to figure out things on your own. And then out of this, you birthed the Zelma
Right.
Foundation
Right.
and are now, focused on helping others and alleviating their depression. I'd love to learn a bit more about like what you do with that as like an inspiration for everyone who's kind of in that state where they haven't put on their
Oh
warrior
yeah.
persona.
Right.
And then also I see a hand raised, and the Q&A is open. So if anyone who raised their hands wants to type their question in the Q&A, that'll be best. And then we can bring you on in just a couple minutes. Yeah. Okay, take it away, Vanessa.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the Zelma Foundation, of course, I launched it in honor of my sister who passed away because I didn't want women to suffer alone. I didn't want women to go through what she went through and what I went through alone. So what I do is I coach women who are battling depression or living with depression and anxiety to get them to a point where they are comfortable either seeing a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, depending on their situation. Or now, I'm happy to be able to add the element of having them join a peer support group because I have started a partnership with ShareWell where getting, I think, or I want to say, sometimes therapy, some people may not see the light in therapy, right? And so something else that I also share in my sessions is that when you're looking for a mental health professional, they're humans just like we are. And I believe Z said that, and then Amy, you may have mentioned that as well. It's not a one size fits all. So they're practitioners. And so when you go to see one therapist, or maybe some folks in the audience, you've seen a therapist, you're like, that I'm not doing that again. That's one person. You keep going until you find the one that resonates with you. It took me three people to find the right therapist for me. And you'll know when that practitioner is good for you. Therapists are people. They have different personalities and different ways of doing things. And so you can start by asking your primary care physician for a referral, but then just keep interviewing is really what you're doing. You set up a session, an appointment, and then you see if that person works. If they don't work, then you try the next one. And so that's what we do with the in the Zelma Foundation. So I coach you to a point where you're comfortable either seeing a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, or agree to join a support group, which is definitely vital. Or depending on your level of anxiety and depression, maybe this is just what you needed was the coaching. Just someone to be an accountability partner for you, to help you along the journey, to provide you with some guidance, some tools, and get you back to living the life that you want to live. Because some of us, and I
Mm.
do encourage people not to wait to see a mental health professional, especially if you're dealing with depression, because a few years ago, I listened to a podcast put on by this psychiatrist, and one of the things that she said was people who go through depression, and especially if you're in major depression, that type of depression where you don't want to get out of bed. If depression lasts longer than 90 days, 6 months, I forget the timeline, but definitely no longer than 6 months. If it goes that long, there's a chemical change that can actually happen in your brain that will get you stuck. And I'm here to be a testament to that because I didn't get the help that I needed soon enough. So don't
Mm.
put it off. There's no shame in this. We all have a brain. So sometimes our brains get tired and we get into these situations where we need help. If you broke your leg, are you going to say, "Oh no, I'm going to try to I'll fix this. I'll get through this"? No. You're going to go to the doctor so that you can get a cast. Mental health
Mm.
is no different. And to me, mental health is probably even greater because it's your mind. And if we're not able to use our mind the way we want to help us live our lives the way we want to live, there's not a lot we can do. So get professional help in some way is always my advice, which is the entire reason that the Zelma Foundation exists.
Mm. Thank you, Vanessa. That's yeah, very inspiring for all of us on the call here. So
Mhm.
you covered all of that. And I mean, really, that is also one of the main reasons that ShareWell exists is to, when you do feel alone on your support journey, you can find people on our site who can identify with you. So regardless of family, friends, that support, you can
Mhm.
create your own support network. So yeah, Vanessa,
Yeah.
you beautifully said that. We are at
Thank you.
time right now.
Right, right.
But for those of you who had more questions, so Vanessa hosts support groups on ShareWell, so you can jump in. I popped a link in there where you can see the rest of the talks that we have today. Also, you'll be able to join a support group through that link. So find Vanessa. I also shared her Instagram as well for her personal gram, and then also the Zelma Foundation. And yeah, just want to thank you all for joining. We hope
Yes.
to see you in the next talk. And yeah, just know like if you are feeling alone, you don't have to be alone. Like you have a community of people behind you. ShareWell hosts, support groups, many every single day, a
Mhm.
lot that are focused on depression. We also have a lot of personal growth ones as well, a lot of ones around positivity to kind of really uplift your mood on those very hard days. And so, yeah, with that, thank you so much, Vanessa.
My pleasure.
Just,
Mhm.
yeah, your vulnerability and your wisdom. I had many, like, I call them wisdom drops where that I
Oh,
was writing down, like
oh,
typing.
yay. Yay.
So just thank you so much for being you and all that you do.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. See you
Bye.
on the next one.